The night they told me I didn't matter. They were pouring champagne for my sister. I was still sitting at the table, silent, invisible. But that night, something inside me snapped, and I promised myself they were never going to see me coming. Asterisk, asterisk. The day my parents told me I wasn't worth it, they didn't even look at me. We were sitting at the dinner table, the one with the uneven leg and the fake cherrywood finish. I had just announced that I'd been accepted into Bradley Heights University's business program. Full acceptance, competitive round, top 5% of applicants. My voice shook with excitement. Dad didn't raise his eyes from his phone. "That's nice," he muttered. 30 seconds later, Elena came barreling through the door, waving her acceptance letter like it was a winning lottery ticket. "I got into Bradley Heights, too! Poli-sci honors!" she squealed. And just like that, the air changed. Mom jumped up with tears in her eyes. Dad stood and clapped. Champagne was pulled from the back of the fridge. I watched them toast my sister like she'd won something we hadn't both achieved. They forgot I was still sitting at the table. 2 weeks later, we were back at that table. Only this time, the bomb dropped.
"We need to talk about college finances,"
Dad said, folding his hands. But his eyes, they were locked on Elena.
"We've saved enough to fully fund your tuition, sweetheart,"
he continued. "No loans. We want you to focus on your studies without distractions." Elena smiled. She glowed. I waited. Waited for them to turn to me and say they'd figured something out for both of us. That they believed in me, too. But all I got was silence. I cleared my throat. "What about me?" The temperature in the room dropped. Dad gave me a look. Clinical. Calculated. "College is an investment, Sloan, and Elena's always shown more promise." I blinked. "What?" Mom reached across and touched my hand, like that would soften the blow.
"You're independent, honey.
You'll figure it out. Maybe consider a community college, or take out some loans." Then she said it. "She deserves this. You'll be fine." I didn't speak for the rest of dinner. Didn't cry either. Not until I was behind my locked bedroom door, staring at the ceiling fan spin in slow, uneven circles, trying to process the fact that I had just been erased from the future they were building. All my straight A's, the part-time job, the business competitions, the teacher recommendations. None of it had ever been enough. They had chosen her. Again. That night, I pulled the blanket over my head like I used to when I was little. Only this time, I didn't feel small. I felt something else. Something colder, heavier, resentment. And it whispered in the dark, "They'll regret this." I opened my laptop at 2 a.m., typed full scholarship business programs, and whispered aloud, "They're never going to see me coming." The night they told me I didn't matter, I didn't cry. I should have. That would have made sense. But instead, I just sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall, and feeling everything harden inside me. Something broke, but something else took its place. I turned on my laptop, searched. Full ride scholarships, business major. Financial aid for independent students. Jobs near Bradley Heights campus. And then I did something I hadn't done in years. I picked up the phone and called Grandma Josie. She answered on the second ring, voice groggy but kind. "Sloan? Sweetheart, are you okay?" I tried to speak, but my throat caught. "They're not paying for me," I whispered. "They said Elena deserves it more." There was silence. Then I heard her exhale sharply. "Oh, honey, they're blind." She didn't try to fix it. She didn't offer excuses. She just listened. Then she said something I'll never forget. "You were never small, Sloan. They just chose not to look. Don't let their vision limit your value." The next morning, I drove 2 hours to her little house on the hill. She met me at the door with strong coffee and a folder of old scholarship brochures. We sat at her kitchen table, scarred with decades of meals and conversations, and made a plan. I would go to Bradley Heights, no matter what. I'd fund it myself. Work, loans, grants, anything. And she would co-sign wherever she legally could, even on her tiny, fixed income. I remember the pen shaking slightly in her hand as she signed the first loan document. This signature isn't about money. It's about belief. Before I left, she handed me a small, folded square of fabric. I was saving this for a moment that mattered, she said. I unfolded it. A deep navy graduation stole, stitched by hand with a single line embroidered in silver thread. You were never small. They just chose not to look. I pressed it to my chest. Didn't cry. Not yet. But I felt it. That flicker inside. The start of a fire. That night, back in my room, I made a new spreadsheet. Color-coded, budgeted to the cent. Scholarship deadlines, work-study contacts, rent estimates. I was going to do this. No matter how hard it got. They had handed Elena everything, but I would build something they couldn't ignore. At 2:03 a.m., I submitted my first scholarship essay. Then I typed 4 words at the top of my new planner, capital letters, underlined twice. Outwork, outlast, outshine. My mattress sat directly on the floor. No frame, no headboard, just a hand-me-down set of twin sheets that smelled faintly of lavender and dust. The pipes gurgled through the night. The ceiling had a water stain that looked like a spreading bruise, and the radiator only worked if I kicked it, twice. Welcome to my new life. I moved into that apartment 3 days before orientation at Bradley Heights, 45 minutes from campus by bus, if it showed up on time. I had 3 roommates. One smoked inside even though the lease forbade it. One talked to her cat like it was a toddler. The third barely spoke English and screamed into her phone at 3 a.m. every night. But rent was cheap, and it was all I could afford. Meanwhile, my parents, they hired professional movers for Elena. They posted pictures online, her smiling in a matching pink comforter set, surrounded by string lights and gold foil dream big pillows. Dad captioned it, "Our future leader ready to take on the world." My name wasn't mentioned. I unpacked my thrift store textbooks in silence, used grocery store boxes as shelves, and wrote my class schedule on a napkin because I hadn't bought a planner yet. That first night, I cried quietly into a hoodie, too tired to find my pillow. I didn't belong there. Not on that campus, not in that apartment, not in this life. The next morning, I put on the only business casual outfit I owned and headed to campus early. The orientation hall was buzzing. Families snapping photos, laughter echoing down marble corridors. I kept my head down and tried not to stare at the girls in matching sorority shirts whose parents handed them meal plans like candy. That afternoon, I started my first job, barista, 6 a.m. shift. Training started with the espresso machine and ended with a burnt hand. 2 days later, I picked up a second gig at a used bookstore near the bus station. Weekend closing shifts, cash in hand, no benefits. On Friday night, I collapsed, literally. I came home after back-to-back shifts, dropped my bag, and hit the floor before I reached my bed. The room spun, my hands were shaking, and my throat felt like sandpaper. My new roommate Zara rushed over with a glass of water. "Whoa, you okay?" I managed a nod, but my vision blurred. "You been sleeping at all?" I didn't answer. She stared for a second, then said, "Damn. Whatever you're running from must be chasing you hard." The next morning, after I forced down instant oatmeal, I walked into my first economics lecture. And Professor Monroe looked directly at me and said, "Let's see what the scrappers in the room can do." For the first time since I'd arrived, I felt seen. Every hour had a price. If I missed the 5:10 a.m. bus, I'd lose 15 minutes of tips at the cafe, If I didn't eat while walking to class, I'd be late for Professor Monroe's attendance roll. Sleep was optional. Schedules were sacred. I created a color-coded planner: pink for work shifts, blue for classes, green for scholarship applications, and red for what I called crisis time. The red blocks kept growing. But something strange started happening. The harder I worked, the sharper my mind became. While others panicked about basic accounting terms, I was doing budget spreadsheets in my head before the professor finished writing on the board. At the bookstore, I shelved volumes on entrepreneurship between latte runs. I started learning marketing by observing customer habits, pricing strategies, and what covers made people stop. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real education. Zara, my chain-smoking, no-nonsense roommate, started noticing my insane pace. One night, I came home at midnight with coffee on my shirt and a presentation due by 8 a.m. She raised an eyebrow. "You running a startup or surviving a war?" I dropped my backpack with a groan. "Both." She shoved a paper plate toward me. "Eat. You look like a ghost that skipped dinner." I blinked. Spaghetti. Warm. Garlic heavy. I nearly cried. From that moment on, she became family. We built a rhythm. She cooked when I couldn't. I edited her psychology papers when she fell behind. And sometimes, when the noise of our building got too loud, she'd slip a sticky note on my laptop. "You got this, boss lady." At first I laughed, but then I started writing it at the top of my to-do lists. Small, in pencil. My version of armor. Midway through the semester, Professor Monroe stopped me after class. "You're applying real-world strategy to theoretical models. That's rare." I froze. Was that a compliment? He handed me a flyer. Research assistant needed small business resilience project. "The hours are flexible. You'd be paid, and frankly, I think you'd thrive." I walked home that night, gripping the paper like it was a golden ticket. If I got the position, I could drop one of my jobs. Maybe sleep more than 4 hours. Maybe breathe. The next morning, I opened my laptop and started typing my application. Zara peeked over my shoulder. "Research gig?" I nodded. She smiled, wide. "Let's go, boss lady." And for the first time since arriving at Bradley Heights, I started to believe her. My first client paid me $50 in cash, in a crumpled envelope. It felt like a paycheck from the universe. The research job with Professor Monroe opened a door I didn't know existed. Flexible hours, real strategy work, access to case studies and surveys about small businesses trying to stay alive with pennies and duct tape. Sounded familiar. After hours in the research lab, I started noticing patterns, common pain points, gaps, small business owners who couldn't afford full-time help, but desperately needed organization. So I built something: a single landing page, white background, 2 fonts, no logo, Mercer Virtual Services, admin support, calendar management, email cleanup. I used free templates. Zara helped with grammar, and I posted it to 3 local Facebook groups with the caption, "Overwhelmed entrepreneur, let me help." The next morning, I had 2 responses. By the end of the week, 5. By the end of the month, 10. Suddenly, I was invoicing $400 a week, enough to drop one of the cafe shifts, enough to start thinking, this could be something. One of my clients owned a bakery and paid me in a mix of cash and fresh sourdough. Another ran a cleaning company and asked if I could also redesign her flyers. I said yes, then taught myself Canva that night. Zara watched me from the couch, sipping her Diet Coke. "You're really doing it, huh?" I looked up, bleary-eyed. "Doing what?" She pointed to my laptop. "Building." And she was right. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was gaining ground. In business ethics class, I started raising my hand more. My professors began remembering my name. At the bookstore, I overheard one grad student whisper, "She's the one with the side hustle, the one who never sleeps." And for once, it didn't sting. It felt like recognition. Then, one day, while updating a client invoice, I saw a flyer on Professor Monroe's door. "National Student Innovation Competition, applications now open." I paused. Froze, actually. The prize? $50,000 in startup capital. a feature in Business Insight magazine, mentorship from top consulting firms. I stared at the flyer, then took a photo, and whispered, "Not yet, but soon." That night, I updated my homepage. I added a second service package, raised my rates by 10%, and added one small line beneath the site title, in gray italics, built by someone who gets it. It started with a note on the cafe schedule board. New fall hours, all part-timers cut to 10 shifts max. That meant a 40% income drop. Just like that. No warning, no explanation. I stared at the schedule, my name sliced in half, then checked my account. Rent due in 10 days, a tuition payment looming, and my emergency fund, $26.89. I ran to the bookstore, hoping to pick up more hours, but they'd already hired 2 new students for the semester rush. My chest tightened. I wasn't breathing. I was counting. Every bill, every dollar, every second I didn't have a solution. That night, I couldn't sleep. Zara found me on the floor at 2 a.m., surrounded by paper bills and laptop tabs. "Talk to financial aid," she said firmly. "They'll just give me more debt," I mumbled. Zara crossed her arms. "Maybe, but maybe they'll give you something else." The next morning, I marched into the office and asked for an emergency appointment. Miss Hopkins, a sharp but kind assistant director, listened carefully. I laid out everything. 2 jobs, scholarship gaps, the income cut. She didn't blink. "You've maintained a 4.0 while working over 30 hours a week?" she asked. I nodded, exhausted. "You qualify for an emergency retention grant," she said, opening her drawer. "And Professor Monroe submitted a referral for a paid business research assistantship. He called you the most entrepreneurial thinker he's seen in years." I blinked. Hard. "Wait, what?" She smiled. "Sounds like someone noticed." Later that week, I met with Professor Monroe in his office. The sunlight hit a shelf of business journals behind him as he slid a thick packet toward me. "I've been working on a study about resilience in small business ecosystems," he explained. "You'd be analyzing data, helping refine models, and giving input." He leaned forward. "Frankly, I don't want a theory student. I want someone who lives this stuff." "That's you." I couldn't speak, so I just nodded. That same night, I called Grandma Josie. I told her everything. The job cut, the grant, the new research gig. She listened quietly, then said, "You didn't break, Sloan. You bent and built something better. That's resilience." I hung up, sat still, then pulled out the flyer I'd saved weeks ago. National Student Innovation Competition. Deadline, April. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, then clicked. Start application. Under Business Overview, I typed the first line of my proposal. Mercer Virtual isn't just a service, it's proof that constraint can fuel innovation. And for the first time since the crack appeared, I realized I wasn't falling apart. I was reconstructing. The knock came just after midnight. I was mid-pitch deck revision, surrounded by sticky notes and cold tea. 3 soft raps on the door. I opened it and froze. It was Elena, tear-streaked, hair pulled into a messy bun, eyes red. She held a flash drive in one hand and a broken look in the other. "I need help," she said. Her voice cracked. "I'm failing my senior thesis. Professor Adler says my methodology is fundamentally flawed. I have 3 weeks to fix it or I don't graduate." She stared at me like I was the only raft in the storm. I should have closed the door. I should have said, "That sounds like a you problem." But instead, I stepped aside. We sat across from each other in silence for a full minute. Then she said it. "I had no idea how hard it's been for you." I didn't answer. She looked around my apartment, the secondhand furniture, the whiteboard covered in schedules, the stack of textbooks with tabs on every page. "They said you were doing fine," she whispered. I smiled, flat and tired. "Fine is relative. For the next 3 hours, I walked her through qualitative frameworks and citation mapping. She scribbled notes like a first year, lost, raw, and for the first time in our lives, Elena looked small. Between sessions, she asked quietly, "How do you do it all?" I shrugged. "You learn to sprint in storms when there's no shelter waiting." She sat back. "Mom and Dad never told me about the loans, the jobs, your business." "They didn't ask," I replied. Her eyes filled again, but this time it wasn't pity. It was something closer to guilt. As the days passed, we kept working. We argued, rewrote, fought over sources, but we also laughed. Once, after I roasted her over a clumsy citation, she threw a pillow at me and yelled, Okay, Queen of APA formatting." I almost smiled. Then came the night she stayed late. As I walked her to the door, she turned and said, "You were the strong one all along, weren't you?" I met her eyes. I had to be. She nodded slowly. Everything they gave me, they should have split in half. The next morning, Elena skipped brunch with our parents. Instead, she emailed me her revised thesis draft. Subject line, "From your apprentice, don't judge me too hard." And underneath it, "P.S. I turned down Mom's credit card. Figured it was time I learned to build, too." I sat there, holding the phone, stunned. For the first time since this all began, I wasn't just gaining momentum, I was gaining an ally. The lights above the auditorium were blinding, rows upon rows of folding chairs stretched into the distance. Graduation banners flanked the stage, and a massive screen projected our names, one by one. I stood in line, cap tight, stole over my shoulders, and in my chest, a storm. A week earlier, Dean Carter had pulled me into her office. She smiled over a thick folder. "Your name came up more times than I could count." I blinked. "For what?" She pushed the folder toward me. "You're our business school valedictorian, Sloan, and we'd like you to give the commencement address." I think I blacked out for a full second. When I came to, my hands were shaking. "Me?" Dean Carter leaned forward. "You're exactly who this place was built for, and everything you've built deserves to be heard." Now, standing backstage, I could see them in the front row. Mom in her pearl earrings, Dad in a tailored suit, Elena beside them, hands clasped tightly in her lap, and next to her, right in the center, Grandma Josie, wearing a cobalt blue dress, eyes locked on me. The announcer's voice boomed through the speaker system. "And now delivering this year's commencement address on behalf of the School of Business, Sloan Mercer." The crowd applauded politely. I stepped into the spotlight and took a deep breath. I arrived at Bradley Heights with 2 suitcases, 3 jobs, and a fire in my chest that wouldn't go out. The audience stilled. I wasn't given a safety net, or a trust fund, or even much belief. I paused, let it land. But I had a spreadsheet, a Google Doc, and a plan. I spoke about sacrifice. Late nights, burnt-out mornings, client emails sent between class breaks, and the unglamorous grind of building something no one clapped for at first. Then I shifted. And yet, here we are. Applause began to rise. Some people are born into support. Others have to become the people they needed. I locked eyes with my parents. And for those of us who weren't chosen, let me say this. You are not invisible. You are indispensable. And the tables, they always turn. As I stepped away from the podium, President Mallory returned to the mic. "And now, a few special recognitions." I froze. He looked straight into the crowd and said, "This year, we honor a student who redefined what's possible." And I knew. The moment of reckoning had begun. The auditorium held its breath. President Mallory adjusted the microphone. The silence thundered. This year's Outstanding Graduate Award goes to someone who embodies the very spirit of perseverance, innovation, and impact. I felt my pulse in my ears. While working over 30 hours a week, she maintained a 4.0 GPA, built a business from scratch, supported her peers, and brought national recognition to Bradley Heights through the innovation competition. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Please join me in recognizing Sloan Mercer. The applause exploded. People stood. I walked forward in slow motion, heart pounding, eyes locked on the front row. My father's jaw clenched, my mother's hands tight around her clutch. Elena? Standing, cheering, crying. And Grandma Josie? She didn't clap. She beamed, as if the sun itself rose behind her. President Mallory wasn't finished. What many don't know is that Sloan funded her own education entirely, without financial help from her family. Every loan, every hour worked, every achievement, earned through grit alone. Now the murmurs turned into whispers. Parents glanced at each other. A few looked uncomfortable. I looked at my mother. Her mouth parted slightly, as if to speak. But there were no words. Not this time. Because everyone knew. Sloan's business, Mercer Virtual, now employs 5 students and serves 15 clients across the state. And today, we're proud to announce she has accepted a consulting position with Brightwell & Co., a firm ranked in the top 3 nationwide. The crowd roared. My hands trembled around the award plaque. Not from nerves, from release. I turned to the microphone one last time. I wasn't the obvious choice. I wasn't the golden child. But I built my place here, brick by brick, because I knew one thing. I scanned the crowd. Let it settle. You can't dim a light that fuels itself. As I walked off the stage, I passed my parents. My father opened his mouth. I didn't stop, but as I passed Grandma Josie, she stood, held out her hand, and said one word. Finally. The photograph sat on my new desk. Sunlight poured in through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office at Brightwell & Company. In the frame, me, Elena, and Grandma Josie, graduation robes, big smiles, and in my hands, the award that rewrote everything. The day after the ceremony, I didn't go to the family dinner. I went with my people. Zara, Professor Monroe, the clients who had believed in Mercer Virtual when it was just a Google Doc and a dream. We toasted with sparkling cider. A cake said, "From side hustle to spotlight," and Grandma Josie held my hand and whispered, "You've changed the storyline." Weeks passed. The article came out. Business Insight magazine. Cover headline, "The founder who funded herself." I sent a copy to Grandma Josie, framed. She sent me back a silver bracelet. It had belonged to her grandmother, delicate, inscribed, "You were always enough." One Sunday, I met my parents for coffee. Their idea. They fidgeted more than they spoke. My mother cleared her throat. "We made mistakes," my father added. "We didn't know what you were capable of." I sipped my latte, then said calmly, "You didn't ask." They nodded. It wasn't a full repair, but it was a start. That fall, I launched the First Generation Resilience Fund, a scholarship at Bradley Heights for students who'd built their own way, just like I had. The first recipient? A girl working nights at a bakery while studying full-time. I saw myself in her, and when I handed her the certificate, she cried. So did I. Elena moved into a tiny apartment downtown. She calls every Sunday now. Last week she said, "Every time I budget, I think of you. I finally get it." Some nights I walk home late from the office, heels clicking on pavement, city lights reflecting in glass towers around me, and I think back to the mattress on the floor, to cold ramen, to the time they told me, "She deserves it. You don't." I smile. Because that sentence built an empire. They gave their faith to the wrong daughter. But I turned neglect into fuel. And now, every time they say my name, it echoes louder than their silence ever did. Sometimes the most painful kind of erasure isn't being told you're not enough. It's being told someone else is more. When the people meant to love you first overlook you the longest, it creates a silence that echoes louder than any insult. But here's the truth. Silence can be fuel. It can sharpen your edges, clarify your focus, teach you how to move through the world not waiting for applause, but building your own stage. There's power in deciding that you matter, even if no one around you has the courage or clarity to see it yet. Because self-worth isn't granted, it's declared. And sometimes the declaration happens alone, at 2 a.m., with a half-charged laptop and a fire that refuses to go out. Revenge, when rooted in resentment, can scorch everything. But when rooted in rebirth, when it's about rising, not punishing, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes reclamation. And maybe the most poetic justice isn't proving them wrong. It's becoming someone so undeniable they can't look away anymore. So if you're sitting quietly in the shadows, wondering if anyone will ever choose you, choose yourself first. And then, build a life that turns the silence into an anthem. Thank you so much for staying with me through this story. If any part of it echoed something you've lived, if you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or had to build in the dark while others got the spotlight, I want you to know, you're not alone. There's a quiet strength in people like us, the kind that doesn't need to shout to be real. If this story stirred something in you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to share your own journey in the comments. I read every one, and you never know who might find comfort in your words. And if you'd like more stories that speak to the power of quiet resilience and self-made redemption, feel free to like, subscribe, or share. Only if it feels right. Until next time, keep building, even when no one's watching. Sometimes the most powerful light is the one you kindle yourself.